to the Freedom from Tyranny rally taking place here in Rockville, Maryland today. We are very honored to have folks from different communities who are directly affected and indirectly affected by the CCP. But we're also very honored to have folks affected by all types of tyranny around the world today. And so before we start, we would like to ask everyone to please remember that we are all united in one, which is the fact that our goal is to get freedom for ourselves and for our future generation, no matter who we are and no matter where we come from. So without any further ado, I would like to invite our Mr. Drew Powell, the president of the Rockville Cities Corporation, that has made all of this, as you see, possible today. So, Mr. Drew Powell, there you go.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Drew Powell. I'm the president of the Rockville Sister Cities Corporation, which is hosting today's event, Tiananmen Square Remembrance Day, Freedom from Tyranny. Today, June 4th, is about learning from, being inspired by, remembering and celebrating those who fight for freedom, democracy, and self-determination. We are honored today to have renowned speakers from all corners of the world who have tirelessly advocated against tyranny and for human rights in their respective countries. Whether those rights include the freedom of speech, the right to assemble, religious rights, the right to vote, women's rights, or simply the right to live free, the speakers, which you are about to hear, have fought hard to realize what some may take for granted. Many have made the ultimate sacrifice in the defense of freedom. We honor them today as well. So thank you so much for coming. And we have the mayor of Rockville will speak now, Bridget. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for being here today. With me is Councilmember Beryl Feinberg, who is also the liaison to the Rockville Sister City Corporation. So let's give her a hand. I have the honor and privilege of being the mayor of the city of Rockville, and I want to welcome you to our fine city on this beautiful morning. I am so glad it's cool. Thank you for coming together with us as we honor and remember those who peacefully protested and lost their lives in the name of human rights in Tiananmen Square. Though the statue was surreptitiously removed last year, it is incumbent upon those of us who are outside to speak for those who are inside and cannot speak. We must speak up in the name of freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and democracy everywhere. As we are seeing the rise in tyranny around our world, and I'd like to welcome our Ukrainian supporters here today. Thank you for joining us. And almost happening even in our own country, we must not let those who wish to destroy democracy succeed. The time is always right to do what is right, and I know you know that's from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but I say it a lot. I know that this is a time that we must believe that his peaceful protests were prophetic. His words, his leadership, and his sacrifice must be a beacon for us today. I'm proud to lead Rockville as the 7th most diverse city in America. 1/3 of our residents are foreign-born, and over a quarter of us, 1 in 4, are Asian American. We could be a model for those who come together in peace to discuss our differences, and as the Reverend Barry Moultrie said last week at our rally to end gun violence, can we all just learn to love one another? We are here today to stand up for freedom from tyranny, here and everywhere. Thank you for joining us.
Now, before we go on to our next speakers, just one thing that we would love for everyone to do. If you have a flag or a sign, please hold it up now. If you have a flag or a sign, hold it up now. Again, like I said, we are very proud to especially have our Ukrainian friends here because they have stood bravely against tyranny, just like many of you have also stood against tyranny for many, many years. And so please remember that we're all united in one today. And so without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, Mr. Wei Jingsheng, who is the president of the Wei Jingsheng Foundation. And a little background about him is that he is a renowned Chinese human rights activist and dissident, leader of the Chinese democracy movement. He's most prominent for having authored the essay Fifth Modernization, which was posted on the Democracy Wall in Beijing in 1978. He served as a political prisoner in China for a total of 18 years. He was deported to the United States of America on 16th of November in 1997 on a medical parole. Mr. Wei is the president of Wei Jingsheng Foundation based in Washington, D.C. And without further ado, please welcome Mr. Wei Jingsheng and his interpreter.
Thank you all for participating in these activities.
今天我们大家聚在一起纪念6·4，纪念什么呢？
So we are getting together today and in commemoration of June 4th massacre. And what are we commemorating for?
是纪念那些为了中国的民主化，为了老百姓不受剥削压迫而牺牲了生命，包括受伤的英雄。
We are in commemoration of those heroes who died under the communist regime, and but they were willing to risk their lives, as well as those people who were wounded in the 1989 democracy movement in China.
那是一种精神，反抗暴政，敢于以命相拼的牺牲精神。
That is a spirit that is there to oppose the tyranny and with their own lives.
不一定要有那么深奥的理论，只是平常生活中的耳闻目睹，已经让大家都明白共产党是什么样的东西。
We do not need a very sophisticated series, just what we encountered in our own lives. We already know what the Chinese communist regime is.
虽然洗脑很严重，封锁很严密，虽然在共产党的暴力威胁下，人们不敢说真话，但是我私下里得到的信息说明，大多数老中青人民都对共产党有负面的观察，反抗的情绪正在酝酿，甚至超过1989年。
Despite the communist regime's brainwashing, despite the communist suppression, you still could tell from the conversation with the people, young or old, they were still against the communist regime, and they were yearning for freedom and democracy.
有些人或许是糊涂，或许是利益集团成员，或许是孤陋寡闻。他们说，现在的年轻人已经不知道6·4大屠杀了，只会吃喝玩乐。
Some people may be confused. Some people maybe haven't heard enough knowing what's going on outside. They were kind of saying that, okay, nowadays the young Chinese, they only enjoy their life and they want to eat and drink. They don't really care what's going on outside.
当年的大多数家庭都有人或者有亲戚参加了全国各地的游行示威，他们的后代能如此孤陋寡闻吗？不可能。
However, there were so many families involved in that 1989 democracy movement. Could their offsprings never heard from their elders? No, that's impossible.
不知道什么地方来的莫名其妙的记者在电话里问人家这么敏感的话题，人家敢说真话吗？
And yet there was some kind of so-called reporter ask those kind of questions to those people inside of China. How dare those people to answer you honestly?
共产党的监控、告密和无孔不入的特务活动，使人们 们像周朝那个暴君的时代一样，不敢讲话，只能道路以步。
And then in all sorts of the tricks played by the communist regime that you could whistleblower and to tell what's going on and in secrecy, and that is kind of just like the tyranny during the Zhou dynasty. People do not dare talk to each other. They do not even dare to look at you on the street.
远了不说，最近发生的铁链女事件、病毒清零政策、大白野蛮的不法行为、经济下滑等等。
So let's look at China nowadays. Look at the so-called the chained women who were kidnapped. Look at those people in big white dress. Suppress those people in the name of the COVID resist. What they were doing in China is cannot be tolerated anymore.
Saving the speech until the end, but I'd like to speak on behalf of all communities that have been affected by the Chinese Communist Party. I'll speak on behalf of the Asian Americans that have been standing firm against their activities here in the U.S. Now, as you've seen, that our nation especially have been engaging with China for many, many years. And although we were able to thankfully engage closely with the Chinese people in many matters, whether it's for religious freedom, human rights, etc., unfortunately, all of that was hijacked by the activities of the Chinese Communist Party. And so you might be wondering, okay, what can we as Americans do to address this threat against us? Well, I will tell you this, and I'm sure many of our other panelists will be able to, other speakers will be able to tell you. But one thing that we all should remember is we should ask the question, where is our money going? You see, everything that we buy, for instance, I'm sure every single one of us has something that says made in China in every single product that you have in your household. But we forget to remember that a lot of those products were actually made with labor that resulted out of slavery, a modern-day slavery that we're systematically allowing. Many of the products that you see here, as you might be even wearing them or having them, like I do also, were made by fathers and mothers and even children who were more or less forced into the situation to make these products. And now, unfortunately, we see members of the Uyghur community being forced to make these products that we see and use every single day. Now, I'm not asking everyone to make a direct change and just boycott everything. I know it seems impossible, and I know there are people who will say, well, it's impossible to stop using made in China. It's impossible to cut our economic relations with China. It's impossible to simply get out of the influence of China because they're too big. They have the NBA, they have all of our corporations, they're even in our households in many instances. But let's not forget this one crucial fact. We're Americans. But specifically, we're people of the free world. Remember, we're the people that made it possible to put a man in the moon when everyone said that it's impossible. Over 200 years, close to 200 years ago, there were people who told us that slavery, ending slavery in this country was impossible because it's just been around for too many years. It was just a part of the system. People told us that that was impossible. But yet, even through a bloody engagement known as a civil war, we made it happen. Through the advanced scientific achievements of our innovation of this country, we put a man on the moon. And now, I challenge all of you. JFK said, talent is not the biggest thing that we should be worrying about. In fact, we shouldn't worry at all. It's really about making the impossible possible. And if we've done it once before, we can surely do it again. One thing I will ask all of you to remember is this one crucial fact. The Chinese Communist Party has been benefiting from each and every one of us directly. Not through our purchase of our own product, but through a single thing that I'm sure many of us here are either aware about or a part of, which is the Thrift Savings Plan, which is our federal income plan that has been funding the Chinese Communist Party for years. Now, elections coming up, and I'm not asking you to support one party over the other. I'm not asking you to support any candidate or not support anybody. What I am asking you to do is that you take up the mantle of we the people and ask a simple question to your elected representatives. Is our money going to the Chinese Communist Party? And if you're aware of it, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to ensure that our resources and our money do not go fund a regime that has its guns aiming towards us, literally? The Tibetans have paid a dear price for it. Our friends from East Turkestan, known as Xinjiang, it's a very inappropriate term because it just means new territory, and that territory has been there for many years. Southern Mongolia, Hong Kong, and I even dearly include all the people of China, because every single Chinese people have been the first victims of the CCP. So let's not forget that. So I urge every single one of you to please remember this today as we go on. Now, the next speaker I would like to invite is Mr. Pharm, Dr. Pharmacist and Dr. Trinh Nguyen, of the President of the Vietnamese Community of Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. Dr. Nguyen, if you can come step over the stage, appreciate it. Now, as you know, the Vietnamese community have been a fervent fighters against communism since the fall of Vietnam to the communist regime. And we are more than honored to stand with the Vietnamese community in their fight against totalitarianism. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Nguyen.
Thank you. Vietnamese people and Chinese people, we are neighbors, living side by side for thousands of years in peace. But nowadays, the government of Vietnam, the communist regime, the government of China, another communist regime, they behave the same way. They consider the people are their enemies. And we try our best to survive along with Chinese people. Someday we can change the course of history and communist movement and rebuild our neighborly friendship again. We support the Chinese people, just like the Chinese people have been supporting us through the years with the now the South Chinese Sea has been stolen by the Communist Chinese Party, and the whole world community condemned that action. And we call on everybody to end all the tyranny, to end all dictatorship, and to rebuild our humane society, and with freedom and democracy and many human rights. Thank you very much.
And because of a schedule conflict, and our next speaker, Mr. Phan, will be speaking on behalf of the Vietnamese community. So please welcome Mr. Thong Phan, the chairman of the organization Committee for Vietnamese International Human Rights Day.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to represent our Vietnamese community of the U.S.A. Also the Vietnam Human Rights May 11 organization. On behalf of Vietnam Human Rights May 11 organization, we are proud of the solidarity of all the international community who have joined hands today and stand up to oppose the brutal and despicable crime of China in the 23rd commemoration of the June 4 Tiananmen Square massacre. We must unite to create strong support to support people who have suffered in communist countries because they are willing to protect their government oppression and dictatorship. Wherever community system is established, it builds up authority of tyranny, poverty, and atheism. We can look at Ukraine now as one of the best examples of victim of communism. A peaceful and independent country now has been invaded by her neighbor, communist Russia. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner of Human Rights verified a total of 4,169 civilian deaths during Russia's military attack on Ukraine as of June 1st, 2022. Of them, 208 were children. Furthermore, 4,982 people were reported to have been killed. However, they specified that the real number to be higher. In fact, the number was too small when compared to the small incident in one.
Thank you so much.
And reprehensible for just one day. This Saturday, 2 years ago today, China People's Liberation Army garrisoned hundreds of tanks trying to destroy a strong spirit 89 democracy movement. Not only with vigor and modern Christianity, but also with massive attack of lethal weapons. Even though the China government claimed only 254 deaths on that day, the real number estimated from 2,700 to 3,200 deaths. And our former Vietnam President, Mr. Nguyen very famous quote: "Don't listen to communists say, but look at what they do." We would like to change today's circumstances. Don't listen to China communists say, but look at what they did to their people at Tiananmen Square in 1889 and how they have done to battle and carve up people in 1949 and to Hong Kong people recently. The audience in the gap. Vietnamese joined by Uyghur, Tibetan, Hong Kong, Chinese, and Italian communities, and all the human rights activists around the world want and face the people change of Chinese men demand that maintain order and labor rights and freedom of all citizens of China, and compensate all death and injured victims in that massacre. Today, we show the international community our solidarity against Chinese expansion and dictatorship. China Square incident took place 33 years ago. Vietnam, Biden Square protest will be tomorrow. Our sincere thanks for a lot of our members, all of you, coming here to the meaningful demonstration of future support for human rights, democracy, and freedom for all nations and communities who have been expressed and suffered for Chinese. United, we can do it. Thank you very much for coming here. My fellow allies, you want to say something? Down, China communist. When you say this, please say 3 times down, down, down. Down, China communist. Down, down, down. Down, China communist. Down, down, down. Down, China communist. Down, down, down. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here today with all of you as we're kind of resisting towards a common goal. I'd like to call attention to the fact that today, our very own State Department tweeted to honor protesters whose calls for democracy, quote unquote, came to a violent end, with no mention of the perpetrators. So I just want to emphasize, we are here today to remind us these things did not happen to martyrs. Ordinary people with a strong desire for freedom were massacred by a tyrannical, evil leaders who remain in power today. 33 years. 33 years since that ugly and devastating day. Blood stained the stones of the square, and even more brutal was the crushing of lost hope, lost promise, and lost vision for China. But events like this today can help us to revive that hope and renew our commitment to fighting for a better future. Today's China was formed by this bloodshed, as was our present world order. And the price of complacency, of willful naivete towards a so-called government that would massacre its own citizens is now being paid by the entire global community. We ignored the reality of Tibet for decades. Now we see Hong Kong falling to authoritarian rule. Finally, I'm here to speak on behalf of the Uyghurs, who are facing the largest mass incarceration as an ethno-religious group since the Holocaust. Never in my young life, studying the lessons of history, could I have imagined that I would personally comfort someone who lost a relative in a modern-day concentration camp. And now I've watched multiple friends go through the agony of lost loved ones, denied the opportunity to mourn them, all because of ethnic identity and the brutality of a Chinese regime that denied the mothers of Tiananmen the same right to mourn, and has continued with the lessons that they learned from the complacency of the international community. The active genocide of the Uyghur people is reaching its 6th year, following decades of brutal oppression. And just a few weeks ago, the world had the opportunity to see the faces of this genocide stare back at them through leaked police documents, if you've heard of the Xinjiang police files. Tear-filled eyes and the shaved heads of children stared back in what I view as condemnation of the current world order, which continues to court and chase Chinese blood money and to turn away from the warning signs that were offered to us for the past 33 years. We're facing a very dark future at present. Moral relativism has caused so many Western leaders and business leaders to refuse to see the evil that is before them, or to summon the moral clarity and courage necessary to confront it. Many have trouble believing that the Communist Party system that we are describing here today could really be so malign. Others, operating from an isolated Western view that amounts to wishful thinking, believe that continued engagement and diplomacy will change the CCP. But as the Uyghurs would attest, this is a false hope. As China's new version of colonialism spreads through the BRI and the massive Orwellian system that's been the core reality for the entire region of East Turkestan for years expands into all of China, just as we've seen in Shanghai, we must recognize that nothing can compare to what we've seen the Uyghur people suffering, but we can fully expect it to spread to Hong Kong and beyond. We're speaking of a regime that has imposed physical and mental torture, forced marriages, systemic rape, forced abortions and birth control, forced sterilizations, child abduction, brainwashing, organ harvesting, yes, genocide. And we still remain surrounded by many apologists for the regime. I'd like to close with a quote from Elie Wiesel, noted Nobel Peace Prize winner and Holocaust survivor, who said, "Sometimes we have to interfere when human lives are endangered, when human dignity is in jeopardy, national borders and sensitivities become irrelevant. Wherever men or women are persecuted because of their race, religion, or political views, that place must, at the moment, become the center of the universe." And so today, we are here to attest that China should be the center of the universe, not because of its power and potential, but because of the evils that are being perpetrated by the Chinese Communist regime. The world should not remove its eyes. Finally, I also heard Rabbi Wittenberg last year speak and say, "China is a powerful country in the world, and Germany was a powerful country in Europe. The oppressor believes that if one lies often enough, if one deceives often enough, if one covers over often enough, maybe nobody will dare to speak. But we've learned the importance of truth, and we're determined to tell it in the face of power. Will we have the moral courage to pass this test and stand for the future of humanity? Let's make the answer a resounding yes. The bonds of Chinese oppression must not be allowed to ensnare the world that our children will inherit." And so today, we're gathered here to proclaim that the voices of those Tiananmen survivors who point us to history, the voices of all of those who rise up to protest the poison that's spread by the Chinese Communist Party will prevail. We won't take our eyes off of China, nor those who aid the Chinese Communist regime, even as the leadership of the regime desperately seeks to strike down friends as foes and condemn true patriots as enemies of the state. Thank you all for being here today.